thanks for everyone who's joined today. So I will take it from here if that sounds good to you, Marina, and I'll tell folks a little bit about me.
That sounds great.
Okay, perfect. So as Marina mentioned about the live tweeting, because you mentioned that, I have my Twitter handle up there on the screen. I won't be looking at Twitter during the presentation, but I will be looking after. I am no good at multitasking, and I want to be focused on this webinar. So here's a little bit about me. My name's Marlene Oliveira, as you heard, and basically I focus on helping nonprofits with their content. I'm a copywriter and a communications consultant, and I work only with nonprofit organizations. I'm also the creator of the Nonprofit Mark community blog, and some people on this webinar might be familiar with the blog. It is a multi-author blog all about how to do nonprofit marketing communications, and all of the content comes from members of the community, people doing the work. And at the same time that I launched Nonprofit Mark community blog, about 3 years ago, I also created the NPMC Twitter chat, which is still going very strong. And so that's simply a free opportunity to connect once a month on Twitter with other people doing the same work. And it's generally the last Thursday of every month. This month we've moved it to Wednesday at 1 p.m. And this month, if you're interested, we're talking about keeping up with changes to social media. So I encourage you to have a peek over at Nonprofit Mark community blog to learn about the chat and the blog itself. And then I also do training and facilitation like this webinar we're on today, workshops, and I have a couple of online courses that I offer. So you can see on the slide I've got a little, on the tablet, a little snapshot from my Start a Better Nonprofit blog course. And so I offer sort of information to empower nonprofits to do the work themselves, or I work as a consultant for them. So that's a little bit about me, and here's what we're going to do today. During this webinar, which I intend to treat as much as possible as part webinar and part workshop, so I encourage you to have pen and paper handy or a document open if you like to work on your computer. But we're going to start with talking about what content marketing is. I'm going to do a little bit of a review of different tactics that can fall under the umbrella of content marketing. Then we're going to talk about how to evaluate the content that you produce. And what I mean here is how to evaluate whether you are simply producing content or whether you're already engaged in content marketing. And then we're going to touch on what you can do next after your evaluation. So what is content marketing? Well, I want to start by sharing a definition from the Content Marketing Institute. They do an annual report called the Benchmarks, Budgets, and Trends along with Blackbaud, and in 2014, in their 2014 report, this is how they defined content marketing. They called it the creation and distribution of educational and or compelling content in multiple media formats to attract and or retain clients or constituents. So that's the definition they had in 2014. And I thought I'd bring up a slide to just give a glimpse of different types of content that can fall under content marketing. So we're looking at things like email newsletters, print newsletters, video content, infographics, microsites, photography or other graphics, in-person events, and blogs. And there are more examples. I've just got a few up here for now. But to give you an idea and get you to start thinking about content marketing and whether or not you deliver content marketing right now. So we've got a couple of polls today to hear from you and find out how you feel about your content production. So we're going to bring up a poll. Marina's going to help me with this. That's simply a yes or no poll asking the question, does your organization do content marketing?
Fantastic.
So I'll just give you a moment to...
Oh, good, Marlene. We've got people voting already, so it looks like people have done this before. They know
yes, all righty.
Go ahead and vote on your screen. Just click the answer that applies to you. And great, so it looks like we've got most everybody voted here. So I'm just going to close and share that poll so that everyone can take a look.
And I think I need to pop out and get my screen back in order, am I right?
I think you're right, Marlene, yes. And we have 79% say yes, 21% say no.
Oh, amazing. Okay, 79%. I'm just making a note. And 21%. I can't see the results, guys, so I'm just making a note. Awesome. So I want to bring up that definition again that we just talked about and that we used to help you answer that poll. So again, we're looking at the creation and distribution of educational and or compelling content in multiple media formats to attract and or retain clients or constituents. There's a reason I'm repeating this. Bear with me for a moment. So when Content Marketing Institute presented this definition to their survey respondents, as we just presented it to you, 92% of nonprofits indicated that they are using content marketing. So that was an overwhelming response. In content marketing, the term is newer and newer. Have we got a problem with my slides, Marina?
Yeah, it's looking like it. I'm just, I think GoTo is being a little glitchy today, to be honest with you. So,
are we back?
Let's just give it a moment here. Okay, I'm going to just try to launch the second poll and see if we can close out. No, okay. Let's just see here. I'll just ask everyone to bear with us for just a moment here. And I'm just going to pop us back to Marlene and see if we can get her slide deck back up. Marlene, you may have to accept. There we go.
Alrighty.
Perfect.
Sorry about that, everybody. I really appreciate you taking that poll, though. All right. So, like in their study and on this webinar, we're hearing a lot of people based on that definition saying they're doing content marketing. But the next year, Content Marketing Institute changed their definition. So they have redefined content marketing as a strategic marketing approach focused on creating and distributing valuable, relevant, and consistent content to attract and retain a clearly defined audience and ultimately to drive action. So the text that I have in bold and italics here that's really standing out on the page is basically what was new. This is what changed when they updated their definition of content marketing. I'm just going to pause for a moment, make sure I'm still good, slides and audio. All good?
Looks good. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Marina. I always get a little nervous. All right. So these are the things that have changed. An emphasis on valuable content, relevant content, that it's not just educational or compelling, but it's valuable and relevant, that it's consistent, delivered consistently, that it is designed for a clearly defined audience and designed to attract and retain that audience, and ultimately to drive action. So it's not content for content's sake. It's not even content for just the sake of offering the value or entertainment or education to the audience. It's to drive a specific action, a specific business goal. So this new definition better reflects that content marketing has grown from just a creation and distribution activity to a formal business discipline. And with this new definition of content marketing, 61% of nonprofits that following year indicated that they were using content marketing. So the response really plummeted when these qualifiers were added into the definition. We're going to get into, when I said that we're going to treat this as a little bit of a workshop, I'm going to help you to look at the content that you produce through this lens and evaluate whether your content marketing is fitting this more strategic definition. But first I thought we could walk through a few examples of some content marketing tactics. And I'd like to invite you to treat this as an exercise as well. So as I go through this list of tactics, this isn't anything you haven't heard of before. You've seen all of these tactics. You might even be delivering all of these tactics. But along the way, I'd encourage you to make some notes. So as I go through the list, make a note about which of the tactics on my list your nonprofit delivers, and to give it that some parameter, you know, on ongoing basis or in the last year, if you've done any of these things in the last year. And then we'll talk about evaluating your list soon. So here we go. The first tactic I want to talk about is email newsletters. The example on the screen here is from Moms Rising. If your organization doesn't already have an email strategy in place, then it should. That strategy should include a mix of email newsletters along with your email blasts and your email appeals. And when you're thinking about your email newsletter, a content marketing approach means that you are focused on delivering useful, relevant content that keeps your organization top of mind and keeps your organization relevant in between asking for things. Most nonprofits that I've encountered that I work with, well, all of the nonprofits that I work with, have some form of email strategy or at the very least email activity right now. They're at least sending emails. But I shared this example from Moms Rising for a few reasons. So first, you can see I've shared their sign-up page on their website on the left. And getting to that sign-up page was very easy. They make their email newsletter very prominent, the sign-up very prominent on their website to get over to this page. So I think that's really important for most nonprofits. Most are trying to grow their list of supporters. And then you'll see they're using a simple text format for their email. It doesn't look very pretty, to be honest, but they're working with a text-based email, which I do think there is room for more nonprofits to consider. Every email that they send is focused on one clear message and one key call to action. So they do actually send emails somewhat frequently, but it's always about just one thing at a time. So for the reader, it's a very focused newsletter. And they also save their ask, at least for dollars, until after there's a little bit of engagement. So the screen capture I have here of this email is an email I got the day after the election last week in the U.S. And this is an organization focused on moms and diversity and strength of community and civil liberties. So they were there right out of the gate with an email that made sense in that moment. I won't get into it any more than that, but it was just very timely. So they just seem to be doing a really good job of knowing their audience and delivering value. And then in this case, it's sort of a petition, the take action button. And not until after taking action do they then ask, you seem to be a supporter of ours, a supporter of our issues, and then they actually ask for a donation. So they still do ask within this campaign, but not right in the email. All right, another type of content I wanted to share is photography and visual content. So here is the photo gallery from the local Toronto Tool Library. And they, as you can see, have a lot of photos, their own original photos that they take on a regular basis about their locations, the tool libraries, the people. You can see their founder there in a lot of the photos, also their volunteers and people using the tools. But they take that content and they share it on Instagram and they share it on Pinterest. So they have a really good approach to using visual content in displaying it and sharing it outside of their website, but in ways that make sense and in ways that will attract interest. So you can see their Pinterest board. It's not just their content. If I could have captured more, they do have their own, images that are similar to what's on their website, their people and their locations. But they're also just using their image strategy to highlight things you can do with tools, and then they get into the tools that they have to help you do the work. Now, I meant to say this with the email newsletter, but just a reminder as we're going through, if your nonprofit produces these types of content, the email newsletter or photos of visual content, don't forget to add them to your list that you're working on right now, that you're pulling together. All right, so here is another type of content you might be producing, and that's video. Video is pretty versatile. Nonprofits can be doing anything from simple, short teaching videos to more elaborately produced storytelling. I would say that these screen captures come from more of a storytelling video, but even still, this is quite a brief video. And it's becoming more and more affordable. The equipment is more affordable and accessible. The skilled volunteers or staff, more people have skills in working with video content. So this is an example from Pathways to Education. And it's a video that is on their homepage. The screen captures are from a video on their homepage. And I included it in this presentation because it's a really great example of using video to tell personal stories, but along the way also sharing the relevance and the impact of the nonprofit. I just grabbed a screen capture from toward the end of the video that has some impact information. And this was a part of Pathways' 15th anniversary video series they did. So there were more than one video. There was more than one video, including stories about their founder and their history. And according to my friend Jason over at Pathways, he tells me these videos went over really well. They shared them on Facebook and had over 4,000 views and a lot of engagement. So I think this is a great example. Head over to either the Pathways website or Facebook group to have a look at these videos. They're really awesome. Another type of content you might be producing is infographics. And I know some people are rolling their eyes at infographics at this point. They were overdone for a while. But when they're used properly, they are still an interesting and accessible way to present data or information visually. So if you happen to work in a nonprofit that is heavily involved in research or data analysis or data sharing, you can use infographics to share key highlights and takeaways from sort of your larger bodies of research or larger bodies of work. And you can see how this can play into pulling it apart into infographics for sharing and for reaching out to people online in other spaces like on social networks, bringing them back to your website to see your core materials. So I have two examples here. One is older, but I really like it. It's always stayed in my infographics examples because it's from Imagine Canada, and like the Mercy Corps example on the right, I think in these cases, infographics are being used to really depict information visually. Sometimes we're just seeing icons next to large blocks of text in infographics, but these are infographics done well. So if you do infographics or video, make sure to add those to your list. Another type of content that some people consider to be part of the content marketing suite is microsites. So what is a microsite? A microsite is a branded content site that lives outside of your organization's homepage or URL, and outside of your main URL. And being off on its own removes distractions that can come from other messages or offers. And many nonprofit websites have a lot going on. So when you want a really focused message for a really focused audience, microsite can make sense. They're often either campaign-based or topic-based. And here I have an example from the David Suzuki Foundation and an example from drugfree.org. So the David Suzuki Foundation example is a microsite that they have for their 30 by 30 challenge. And this is a campaign they do every year to encourage people to spend 30 minutes in nature every day for 30 days. So the microsite is a hub and a home base for the challenge where people can get information about spending time in nature, about how to do the challenge in their workplace or at school or on their own. And importantly, they've built into this website a lot of opportunities to sign up, thereby joining their email list. And the Above the Influence Challenge is a site, like I said, from drugfree.org, and this microsite is focused on helping, it's for their Above the Influence campaign, and it's geared toward teens and the influences around them surrounding substance abuse. So technically this is also a campaign-based microsite, but there is a lot of information here too, so it could be seen as an information-based one, and they even have a blog on this microsite that gets updated regularly. So if your organization has produced a microsite in the last year or has revamped a microsite for a campaign, add it to your list. The next couple of examples I have here under the heading research report are actually a policy brief and a research report. So publishing a research report, you can use this kind of a document, this type of content, to share the results of a study or of some kind of investigation or exploration of a topic at your nonprofit. And this type of report can help your organization position itself as a thought leader or an expert, as well as showcase your ability to do analysis and get to the heart of why these things matter. So my friend Marcus at Maytree shared with me this policy brief that they experimented with producing the report as a PDF and hosting it on their website, but also sharing it as a long-form blog post over on Medium to experiment with getting new visitors, new interest, new traffic back over to Maytree. And then the example on the left is the Digital Outlook report from the Nonprofit Technology Network. And they do this report with partners. This is the second year. And in this case, you can see how they are using their Digital Outlook report to support their mandate of helping nonprofits to understand how to use technology more effectively to support their missions. So they've created some benchmark information, and they're coming back and doing a report each year. And something interesting to point out about this report is that they require email sign-up to download it. And so I'm actually going to highlight some of the results from this report during my presentation because they're relevant to what we're talking about today. So if you do produce research reports, or like in the case of Maytree, it's more of a policy brief, add it to your list, reports. And then my next example that I want to share, oops, I went up the wrong way, is in-person events. So in-person events, like many of these tactics, you might be thinking, well, we've been doing these before. Have we ever heard of content marketing? We've been doing this outside of content marketing. In-person events fit into content marketing because they are an opportunity to provide your content in a more personal setting. So it's another way to deliver content. And they have the added bonus of giving you the chance to make real connections with your audience, with your participants. Oh, we're having issues with sound. I see that from Marina. Marina, are you still hearing me okay?
We are, yes. I believe it's just a small number of people that are having some issues. I think GoTo's just being a little glitchy today. So
Oh dear.
just rest assured for those that can hear us, if you do lose sound today, everything's working fine on our end, and we do have the full recording that's happening right now, and we'll make sure that everyone gets that tomorrow. So you can just go ahead,
Awesome.
Marlene. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Marina. I had one instance one time where I was well into about 15 minutes into, well, in the middle of a webinar before I realized that no one could hear me, so I always like to check in. So with in-person events, as I was saying, it's a more intimate experience, and they're also a great way to leverage content. You know, you might be doing a webinar, can it be an in-person event, or vice versa? And in the case of in-person, you can talk to audience members and you can gauge whether certain topics are resonating, whether people are, you know, interested in this type of information, and also to get ideas about future content. So if you run in-person events for your nonprofit, feel free to add that to your list that you're pulling together. So I just mentioned webinars. Webinars are fantastic if your audience is interested in some kind of in-depth learning or training on a specific topic. If you have in the past done live events but not webinars, you can consider webinars as a way to take your live event content to a larger online audience. And then you can provide it either live or recorded or both, as we were just talking about. So if part of your mandate is to provide education, these can be an effective way to reach more people. And incidentally, to build your email list. Most of the time, being able to get the access information to join a webinar means we need your email, we need you to sign up. So this is a great way to build your list of people who want to hear from you by email. Here I have a couple of examples from Prostate Cancer Canada and the Mental Health Commission of Canada. And I highlighted these two because they both have an ongoing webinar program, and they have very specific tracks for their webinars based on different segments of their audience. So it's nice to have a look at these organizations that are doing it well and are clearly filling a very specific information need for their audience. My next example is podcasts. So this is a funny one. Podcasts are hard. I need to give a thank you to Angela at YMCA Canada, because I have plucked this one podcast example from a blog post she wrote over on the Nonprofit Mark community blog. I find it very difficult to find nonprofits that are producing podcasts and continue to do so on an ongoing and consistent basis. So I have a roundup here from the Rabble Podcast Network. They are a podcast network, as in the name, so you can see different podcasts from different organizations brought to you by this nonprofit. And Volunteer Yukon uses podcasting periodically for training and for outreach with their community. You've probably heard people say podcasting is back, or podcasting is here, or podcasting is back or here again. However you look at it, it is growing. Podcasting is far more popular than it was just a few years ago. But as I just mentioned, what I'm seeing is nonprofits kind of dabbling in it and then disappearing. So it's still a relatively quiet space for nonprofits. And that means it's still an opportunity where you can come in and stand out if you can produce excellent audio content. And podcasting is nice because it's a pretty affordable thing to produce. It's much more straightforward than video. It's kind of easier and quicker to produce in some ways. It's a more intimate experience, consumption experience for your audience. You know, they're listening, they're spending time with a voice of representing your organization. So it is something worth considering. Now that brings me to something I meant to mention earlier, and that is, for all of these content marketing examples, I always put the word out. You know, I share from what I know and what I'm looking at in my clients, but nonprofits can be quite shy about sharing their own content marketing wins or the content they produce. So for any of the examples I've gone over so far, if you have something to share that you're proud of, please share it in the comments or over on Twitter using the hashtag. And I'd love to see it. I'll have a look after, and you know, your content can be featured in a future blog post or presentation, but I would also just love to know about it. So if you happen to be doing podcasting, please add it to your list, and in this one in particular, please reach out to me and let me know what you're doing and how it's working for you. All right, so we're going to look at the next example, and that is our second last example. So we're almost through these, but this is print newsletters or magazines. So we've been talking a lot about digital content, and many organizations are increasingly focused on digital communications. But print is definitely still alive and well for certain audiences. And in a way, print might come around again as a way to stand out the more everybody else goes digital. But I say that with the caveat that you've obviously got to carefully evaluate the costs and the benefits of going to print, because for many nonprofit organizations, the move to digital or the move to electronic newsletters, it does make sense. It is more cost effective. So this is just something to consider very carefully. But if it is the right way and the most effective way to connect with your constituents, then maybe you should hang on to your print newsletter or magazine, or consider introducing a very niche newsletter or magazine in print. So I've got a couple of examples here. One of them, the one on the right, I actually picked up from my friend Pam Grow. She featured it on her blog as an effective newsletter that gets results for its nonprofits, the High Vistas Journal, from the Blue Ridge Parkway, Friends of the Blue Ridge Parkway. And then my friends at World Vision Canada, shared with me Childview magazine. So they use this magazine. They send it out to existing and previous supporters to keep them informed about World Vision's projects and their work, and to try to maintain and reaffirm their commitment to the work of World Vision. And so in the magazine, they've got a lot of stories and photos and infographics, rich visual content and written content to keep their supporters engaged and connected to the organization. And something else they do that's excellent is they do focus groups and reader surveys on a periodic basis to make sure that this magazine is delivering value to the readers. So if you do a print newsletter or a print magazine, please add it to that list you're pulling together. And my last tactic that I'm going to go over today is blogs. So I've got a few examples here. And I'm interested to know if you've added a blog to your nonprofit's website, or if you haven't had one over the last few years. I do feel that blogging does have many benefits for a nonprofit, including the ability to provide fresh new content to keep visitors coming back and search engines happy. And a blog also can just serve as a hub for other types of content, other forms of content marketing. So a blog is a place that you can use to share videos. If you do videos infrequently, when you have them, you can host and share them, embed them on your blog. Same thing with podcasts. You can use a blog for show notes, to embed infographics or other visual content, along, of course, with your written stories, your written news announcements, and other updates. So I have 3 examples here. They're simply 3 examples of blogs that do a great job of keeping their blogs lively, up to date, and working with internal players to develop and produce content. So we've got the Stop Community Food Center, the Canadian Red Cross, and I've brought Moms Rising back up again here. The reason I did that, I'm sure actually the Stop and Red Cross do the same thing, but I just recently came across my desk how Moms Rising really integrates their email newsletter with their blog. Very similar or the same content, that if you want to go a little deeper, you can do so on the blog. Of course, the blog is going to bring its own audience, people who are not subscribers, and then potentially get them to sign up. And then that blog is that place, because it's on their website. It's a place where people can take action after reading that content. So can you add blogs to your list? Do you have a blog at your nonprofit that you have either started or that you've been running in the last year? So I mentioned the list. When I started showing these examples, I asked you to make a note of which of these tactics your nonprofit delivers or has delivered in the last year. And my question for you is, but is it content marketing? So let's use our time now, the rest of our time together, to help you to start evaluating your own content. And what I'm going to ask you to do very practically is to take a look at your list of tactics that you've written down right now, and consider which item on your list you're most proud of, or it's the most successful for you. So what would be your top or your most successful type of content on your list? Everyone's probably there's going to be some variation here, and just circle the one you're most proud of or that has been most successful for you. And then I'll ask you, or of course if you're working on a computer, you can just highlight it, and then I'll ask you to just write that down again, put it at the top of a page, or draw a line and start a new section of your page, and write that tactic down. If it's our blog, if it's our print newsletter, just write that down again. And then under that heading, I'm going to go over a few questions for you to answer as you think about that one specific tactic that you're delivering. So as I move over to these questions, I'm going to remind you of where these questions come from. And this is, again, that definition of content marketing, the revised definition of content marketing from the Content Marketing Institute. So content marketing is a strategic marketing approach focused on creating and distributing valuable, relevant, and consistent content to attract and retain a clearly defined audience and ultimately to drive action. So I've broken this out into a little exercise in terms of getting you to answer these questions. So here's the first question to write down underneath the tactic that you wrote down. Have you clearly defined your audience? So I'll give you a moment to write that down and to think about it. Now, when I am asking you if you've clearly defined your audience, I do not mean donors, and I definitely don't mean the general public or everyone, which happens very often. I mean, have you taken the time to picture your ideal reader or your ideal audience member? And a crucial step in identifying and understanding this audience member is something called a marketing persona. Because a lot of people struggle with this, I'm just quickly popping over to a slide that has a link here. So on this slide, I've got a link to an article on my blog called Marketing Persona Templates, 10 Options for Nonprofit Communicators. And if you head over there, you're going to see what this says, 10 options of help, 10 options for templates, resources, or how-to articles to help you with developing a marketing persona. So if you've never heard of a marketing persona, basically it is picturing that ideal audience member and writing a detailed description of them, their gender, their age, their job, their economic picture, whether they have kids or not, whether they're single or not, what they do in their day, what kind of a community they live in, and you go and you go and you go and you drill down further and further and further. This is such a crucial step in understanding your audience and understanding their content needs. And it's very tempting to skip this step. I know from experience with clients or with fellow nonprofit communicators that everybody wants to skip this step, but you can't. And I'm going to come back to this point over and over again. But if you want to be an effective content marketer, you've got to take the time to create a marketing persona. And multiple marketing personas, the chances are, depending on your mix, your content marketing mix and your communications mix. So that's my little soapbox about marketing personas. But let's go back to the question. Have you clearly defined your audience? So you wrote that question down. I've now told you that clearly defining them includes creating a marketing persona for them. So it's a simple yes or no. Have you clearly defined your audience? And by the way, the marketing persona goes by different names: buyer persona, audience persona. There are a few, and I've got that sort of outlined in that blog post. Okay, the next two questions that work together. Is your content relevant to your audience? And does your content offer value to your audience? So I went on and on about the need to create a persona, and one reason I do that is so that you can understand who you're creating content for and create content that does appeal to them. So you can create content that they want and need from your organization. So how do you know? How do you know if your content is relevant? And how do you know if it's valuable? Well, when you did create a marketing persona, part of your research was to uncover what information resonates with them. You'll do that. You'll literally be looking at people that represent your audience and researching online, looking at them on social media even, and seeing what they read, what they consume. So you will start to get the picture. You'll start to understand what entertains them. What do they want to know? What do they need to know? So that's going to get you part of the way there. But once that has been established, you can also use engagement as one of your ways of assessing this. So you can look at the content you are delivering. For example, which of your emails are getting opened? And which links within your emails are getting clicked? What posts are getting shared? And what posts are getting commented upon? Whether those are blog posts or social media posts. What video content is getting watched? What graphics are getting pinned, and what content in general is getting liked. So engagement will give you some idea of whether content is resonating or not. Even beyond that, you can ask. So ask someone from that audience group. Hopefully you have a way to ask, or you can work through someone within your organization to reach out and ask some of these questions. Speak to people from your target audience. Conduct a reader survey or even individual questions over time in your email campaigns. But ask people, what do they want to know about? What do they like receiving? One of the big things about content marketing, arguably a nuance from communications, over the years, is that content marketing means thinking like a publisher, not an advertiser. So realistically, you are going to promote your organization's mission. You're going to promote your organization's programs and services and calls for support and calls to sign petitions, programs and events. But your content should also cover a range of topics that fill in the spaces in between, that inform or educate or help or entertain. You're thinking like a publisher where the content itself is the value your organization is providing. So I made that point about asking your audience what it is they want to receive, what it is that they're looking forward to receive, because content marketing is about delivering content that your audiences will look forward to getting. So back to these two questions. Maybe if you haven't written them down, write them down now. But is your content relevant and valuable to your audience? From what you know now, I've talked a lot about a lot of ways to start to investigate it, but from what you know now, and that tactic you've written down at the top of the page, yes or no, is your content valuable and relevant? The next question, are you publishing on a consistent basis? I said that content marketing means thinking like a publisher, and it means creating content on a regular and a predictable schedule. So are you doing that? Again, think of that one tactic that you highlighted or that you wrote down. Are you delivering something in that category on a consistent basis? Have you established a publication frequency? This is critical. And do you have a content calendar that was built based on that frequency? And the frequency will depend on you, your organization, and your audience. It could be daily. That's really tough for a lot of nonprofits. It could be weekly. It could be twice a month or monthly. As we get further and further to things like quarterly, that starts to move away from a true content marketing mindset. People will potentially forget about you in between. But that does, again, that depends. A print magazine might make sense quarterly only. So back to the question, and you writing this question down and then putting your answer down beside it. Are you publishing on a consistent basis? Yes or no? One more question for you, and that question is, have you defined a clear, measurable goal? So what is the purpose of your content? Again, just for the sake of this exercise, think of that one tactic you wrote down. What is the purpose of that content? Is that clear for you? What are the organizational strategic priorities that that piece of content supports? So to give you a few examples, I'm hoping that at your organization there is some kind of a strategic plan in place. That makes it a lot easier for us as communicators. If your organization has a 3-year or 5-year or 7-year strategic plan in place, there are likely some big picture goals that your organization, hopefully are some big picture goals for your organization within that. Your big picture strategic priorities and objectives. So it could be around elevating your brand in the marketplace and increase brand awareness. It could be about constituent acquisition or retention or loyalty. It could be that you have big advocacy goals that you're trying to reach or specific program growth that you need to support. So then knowing those big picture goals outside of your role as a content marketer or communicator, how are you going to measure success? How are you going to measure whether or not your content is supporting the achievement of those overarching goals? So some very basic examples, if you're thinking about acquiring more constituents or clients or supporters and retaining them, your content can very realistically be measured. The success of your content can very realistically be measured.
Marlene, I'm going to just going to jump in. We've got a bit of static on the line. Not sure what's happening now. We're having all sorts of interesting issues today. I'm wondering, I don't know if you can try switching your mic on and off or seeing if that might work.
Any better?
Unfortunately, no. Okay.
Let me try one more thing here. Any better now?
Yes, that does sound better. Do you want to carry on that way?
Certainly. Sorry, guys. I'm so sorry about that. Okay, so yes, so where was I? If you're trying to build your email list through your content, that's a very measurable indicator of success. Now, you know, if you had those advocacy goals you were referring to, maybe it's number of petitions that are signed and or program registration that comes in. These are things you can measure through digital content at least, because you can look at where people are clicking through from to see the effectiveness of your content. So once again, back to this question, have you defined a clear, measurable goal for your content? Is that a yes or a no for you? So I've walked through this exercise asking you to think about one specific tactic, keeping one specific tactic in mind. But I have also created a evaluation worksheet. Now that we've walked through these questions in detail, you can use this worksheet and you understand what the questions mean, what I mean by these questions, to indicate a yes or no for a range of different types of content for you. So this is a worksheet I created for my MoFlow insiders, my email subscribers, so you do need to go through a quick sign up. But if you head over to moflow.ca/content-evaluation-worksheet, it's a quick sign up to download this sheet and you can go through the exercise that we just went through for a range of different types of content. Oh, yes, I see. Marina's no. I do apologize too, especially since that seemed to be my mic that was being glitchy. I'm sorry about the technical difficulties we're having. So when you complete this worksheet, you're going to look at it and see where you have yeses and where you have no's, and where you can make changes in your content production and your content to move more of your no answers to yeses. But I'll also say, in some cases, to where you should just stop doing some of the things until they can be done properly. I'm going to touch on that in a moment. So before we start to bring this webinar to a close, I want to share some details from another relevant report that I mentioned earlier, and that's the 2016 Digital Outlook Report. So again, I mentioned this is from the Nonprofit Technology Network, and they put this out with their partners at Care2 HJC and the Resource Alliance. It's a great report for anyone on this webinar to check out. It touches on a lot of the content you're probably interested in, a lot of the topics you're probably interested in. So I do recommend you go over there, and you will have to sign up, but to sign up and download that report. But there are a few little takeaways I wanted to share. So on a very tactical level, this Outlook report revealed that nonprofits in this year, it came out this year, so over the next year are planning on testing out a content marketing strategy. 56% are planning on testing out content marketing. 33% are going to test out blogging, and 69% plan to place more emphasis on video. That's interesting, and that might reflect sort of your plans or what you're thinking about, but there were some more sobering findings. One of those findings is that only 23% of respondent organizations have creative supporter personas to help guide their digital strategy. So this is the same thing as the marketing persona, and only 23% of respondents to this survey have created them. And what's particularly, I guess, a concern about this finding is that in the previous year's report, in N10's previous Digital Outlook report, they saw a correlation between organizations who invest in personas and a shorter average conversion between a constituent's first interaction with the nonprofit organization and their first gift or their first donation. So taking the time to create a persona shortened the interval between their first interaction with the organization and their first gift. And furthermore, a shorter time between the first gift and the second gift. So obviously truly understanding your audience and their needs and their content, and then defining and then developing really effective content based on that sets nonprofit organizations up for success. Here's another unfortunate finding. Unfortunately, more than half of the respondents to the survey noted that 20% or less of their digital strategy will focus on lead generation tactics. And most nonprofits are looking to build their constituent base. So I think this is why those researchers found this disheartening, that lead generation should be part of our content strategies, and also that many aren't tracking any kind of ROI or key performance indicators. So the authors go on to say that as a sector, we still don't do a good job at defining success or impact, and that the lack of measurement and insight into our programs is hindering innovation and growth for digital marketing. And they go on, I don't have this on another slide, but they go on to say that internally proving ROI and asking for a bigger piece of the marketing pie, asking for more resources, isn't going to work until we professionalize this part of what we do. Now, when Marina and I discussed this webinar, it was almost a year ago, and I had hoped to bring results of the 2017 Content Marketing Institute report. They released their report findings in the fall, but they have delayed their nonprofit report until the spring. However, I did think it was worthwhile to look at some of the findings of their most recent report, which actually is nearing a year old now. But you remember that when we started, I talked about the 92% plummeting down to 61% when the definition of content marketing changed. Well, last year, it started to go back up again. So that's the good news. 76% of nonprofits, based on that more strategic description, are saying they're using content marketing. But only 26% say they're effective. So the good news and the bad news. A couple of other key points from that most recent report from Content Marketing Institute is that these are the top goals for nonprofits doing content marketing: engagement, brand awareness, and client or constituent retention or loyalty. And we're seeing this align with the Digital Outlook report in terms of what content can do and effective content can do for your organization. And the top content marketing challenges identified by nonprofits are the ability to measure content effectiveness. That's number one. Producing engaging content is close behind, and toppled from the number one spot is a lack of budget to third place. So it's still really important. But to me, this shows more strategic thinking about the content itself, and more of a focus on effectiveness and efficiency with the content that's being produced, not just a desire to be able to do more, but to do more well. This report, every year what they do is they tease out the difference between the people in the survey who identify themselves as effective content marketers and less effective content marketers. So they did that again, and as they did in previous years, and here are some of the points that those respondents who identify themselves as effective nonprofit content marketers, what they have in place. So they have clarity about what success looks like, back to having that measurement mindset. They know what the action is they want their constituents to take and how they can measure the success of their content. They have a documented content marketing strategy. So you have to have a plan, and it needs to be in writing. This will set you up for success. And you need, according to this study, you need to have daily or weekly content marketing meetings. I cringe whenever I see anything to do with more meetings, but I can imagine that these content marketing meetings are setting these content marketers up for success because they're able to talk about content needs, how they're going to fill them. They're probably collaborating more to get the content completed and shared and all of that. So a collaborative mindset to successful content marketing. So I really wanted to close this webinar with a return to that poll, but I'm going to ask Marina what you think we should do, if it will throw us too further out of whack with technology, because now that I've gone over everything that I've gone over, I'm curious how people would answer that same poll. What do you think, Marina?
You know what, Marlene, we've had so many issues today. I'm going to not jinx us, and I think we'll we will skip the poll today.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
No problem. Okay, thank you. So instead of me asking this as a poll, I'll ask you to just ask yourself if you have changed your answer. Whatever you answered when we ran the poll the first time, does your organization deliver content marketing? Have you changed your answer from the beginning of this webinar? Just make a note for yourself and, tell us in the chat or tell us on Twitter if you like. Now, wherever you are, wherever your head is at about content marketing right now, I want to bring up to light the fact that I am not suggesting that every nonprofit should take a content marketing approach. I'm really not. I'm speaking about this topic, but when you're thinking about content marketing, you need to consider that it's time intensive. It's resource intensive. It's creativity intensive. We can tap ourselves out of creativity depending on all of the things we need to create. The results do not come quickly. It is a long-term plan. I would also suggest that every nonprofit needs to consider what is already working. and what are the most pressing goals? And is there a more efficient way or effective way to achieve those goals in the short term? And, maybe consider content marketing later. To shed some, perspective on this, Joe Pulizzi, who some people refer to as the godfather of content marketing, has said, if you're not all in with your content marketing program, you should stop. So are you all in? Do you even want to be all in? Well, if you do, this is from the Content Marketing Institute. I found it quite helpful. You need to have a strong foundation and a strong base. You need everything I've talked about today, but here's a way to distill it down a little bit. Start with a strong base of having selected one preferred content type, and that could be audio content or visual content or video content or text-based content. Decide on a specific platform. Is it going to be a blog, or is it going to be a podcast, or are you going to have a YouTube channel? And it needs to be something you're going to deliver on consistently. I talked about that frequency and a predictable schedule. And it needs to be delivered over a long period of time. That will set you up with a strong base. And a long period of time, at least a year. You need a strong base of at least a year to see success in content marketing. It's a bit of a reality check, but it's true. So this is what I will leave you with to consider so that it's not overwhelming. If you want to try content marketing, you can have tremendous success with a strong base, and that this strong base can be what you design it to be. It can be manageable. It doesn't mean that to be a successful content marketer, you need to be doing all of those many tactics and all year long, all year round. But if you think, for example, that a podcast makes sense and something you can deliver and it works for your audience and your goals, then start it and give it a chance and give it a chance to become a strong base for you. A little more help as you start to consider some of these things. So I do think you should have a look at that Digital Outlook report. I've shared a lot of the highlights of the content marketing research, Content Marketing Institute research, and they have a new report coming up soon, so maybe you just take what I left you with for today. But I do recommend you read their blog if you want to learn more about content marketing. They've got a couple of ebooks you can search for on their site that will help people. I've got them here, The Essentials of a Documented Content Marketing Strategy and the CMI Content Marketing Framework. So if you, again, want to get the essentials in place and get the planning in place. Another blog that I think could help you quite a bit is the Contently blog for content creators and content marketers. And then my own community blog that I run, the Nonprofit Mark community blog, when you get to the tactical part, because we have a lot of people writing that can help you with how to actually do some of these tactics. The first thing that comes to mind are a couple of recent posts on how to do video well and how to plan a video shoot, for example. So I've got those resources for you. You know what the strong base is, and that brings us to time for our questions. I've just put up that worksheet on the slide in case you didn't have a chance to get the URL before. But I suggest you take a little time and you do an evaluation, and then you come back and look at the slides and the content and think about whether you want to be a content marketer and what you need to do to get there. Thanks very much, everybody.
That's great. Thanks, Marlene. So we've got lots of questions coming in, so I think we'll just jump right in if that works for you.
Absolutely.
And we had a few questions come up about using microsites. So first off, are microsites usually hosted at the same domain as the main website?
They usually are not. They're usually on a separate domain.
Great. And so then how would you go about differentiating it from the main site? Are there any concerns about that, or, how do you kind of manage having both?
Yeah, so I'm not an expert in building microsites or planning microsites, but I would say that you need to think about why you feel a campaign, usually I mentioned they're usually campaign or topic based, why you feel the campaign or the topic needs its own hub. So it will be differentiated because it's super focused on just one thing. And it will hopefully link back to your main site, and your main site will link over to it. But it's because you want to create a content experience that is really, really focused on one issue. So that David Suzuki is an example, David Suzuki Foundation example. It's all about the challenge. They're not asking for donations or anything else. They're not asking for volunteers. They want a space to really make that campaign a success. Does that make sense?
I think that makes a lot of sense. Now, on that same note, what are your thoughts about using microsites for events?
Oh, for event registration? Do you know what?
I'm not sure. I'm thinking they're thinking probably registration and all the event details, etc.
Hmm. That's a tough one. I think it would depend on the size and scope of the event and, whether you want the fact that for a lot of organizations, they're hosting events and they're hoping that the event will attract them to their organization. So they do want it embedded in their main, digital home base.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so on to another subject. So we had a great question come in through Twitter. Research reports versus white papers. What's the difference? What should you use when? Is there a difference?
Ah. In my view, there's really not much of a difference. They're a white paper, and I'm not a white paper writer, but my understanding is that they basically are meant to sort of position the meaningful data around a problem or an issue, and then provide the solution in the form of the organization, a program or service that they offer, an advocacy platform that they have. To me, it seems like I just simply hear white paper more in the corporate and tech space, and I hear research reports in the nonprofit space more often.
Okay. Now, when you touched on print magazines, would those typically be being mailed out to supporters?
Yes.
Yeah.
So those are really rocking it old school. This is a case where, they're doing the research to know that people still want this because it is a significant investment. But yeah, it's mailing it out often to a targeted subsegment, like a segment of their overall base.
Great. And I'm sure this will probably resonate with a lot of our participants today. For someone who's wearing many hats, maybe they're a volunteer coordinator, but they also have to do social media, newsletters, etc. Where should they get started with their content review and evaluation?
Where to start? Well, I think this little worksheet that I provided, if you want to do an overall review, it's super quick. So having sat through this webinar, it'll shed some light for you on what you're feeling good about, what you're feeling strong about. And when you look further to where you have no answers, you're going to be able to ask yourself back a number of questions. But I think I do love this question too, and I do agree that it will resonate with everybody. I think as nonprofit communicators, we all need to give ourselves permission to start small, see a thing through, and decide whether it is worth continuing to invest in or not, and giving it a chance to succeed, because sometimes we are pulled in a million directions and nothing has a chance to do as well as we want it to do. So to help kind of funnel that, I would go back to that question, well, what does your organization have as a strategic priority, say in the next year or two? And then who is the audience that you need to reach to make sure you can achieve that objective and support that priority? And then how can content realistically reach that audience? Where are they? So, if it's a blog because they read blogs or they're online when they seek out information about this particular thing, then just do a blog. Just focus on a blog, or just focus on your video content if it's an audience that's really, like it is about a YouTube kind of audience. But give yourself permission to do one thing and do it well, and then amplify it into other formats. And I would say the same goes with social media. I don't see social media as content marketing. I see it as a way to amplify your content marketing. But even still, there's all of this pressure to be in every single space. So go back to that audience and which platform is going to be the best place to reach them. And let yourself have some success with that one main tactic and that one main one main social network that you're going to use to reach out. I know that there's a million other things everyone needs to do in the background, but if you're experimenting with content marketing, that would be my suggestion.
Wonderful, and I'm glad you touched on social media there, because we had a few questions coming up about how social media plays a part in all of this. So if I'm hearing you correctly, Marlene, what you're saying is your content marketing is really your base of all of this, and the social media is more of a communications tool to help you get that information out. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think a lot of, I think Joe Polizzi has said this before, that godfather of content marketing I mentioned. Content marketing is the content on a platform that you own. So if you don't own Facebook, but you own your own website, you own your own email newsletter, and you can own your own podcast. So when you own it, it's yours, it's content marketing. When you don't, it's advertising or organic promotion or social media or native advertising.
That's a fantastic definition. Okay, so moving on. Do you recommend having a common call to action across different tactics? So if you're working on a campaign, do you want to spread that right across all the different things that you're doing?
I would. It's nice to be able to reinforce your message in different places. So then what you do is you take a step back at your calendar for the year and you intentionally commit to this call to action at this time, at this month or this week, and you'll have different calls to action at different times. So everything gets its turn, but it's coordinated when it happens.
Wonderful. Great. Well, I think we're going to end our Q&A session there. I know we're coming up on time. We want to be respectful of everyone's time today. So I want to thank you, Marlene, for a great presentation, and thank you for managing those little tech issues that we were having there with the sound. I know that can kind of throw a presenter off, so I appreciate your professionalism on that.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah,
Thank you for having me, and I'm really sorry about the glitches, especially as I suspect now that my mic could have been one of the factors going into it today. So I want to thank everyone for their patience with that too, for having me.
not a problem. And I also want to extend thanks to all of our participants today. I know that we had a few more glitches than we normally do today, and sometimes tech just goes that way. So I appreciate you all, your patience and hanging in there with us. A reminder that the sound was all good on our end, except for that tiny little blip with Marlene's mic. So, you will get the full recording, and any pieces that you might have missed, you will be able to watch in the video. Before we sign off, I do want to remind you that we will also, in the email that we send you tomorrow, provide a link to a short survey. I hope that you'll fill that out. It helps us to refine our webinar content, our delivery. You'll have a chance to let us know if there's other topics you'd like to see covered in the future, so please do fill that out. We'll also include some of the links that Marlene mentioned today so that you have those nice and handy for you as well. So with that, I'd like to thank you all again for joining us today. Thank you, Marlene, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.